Hello everyone and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be looking at Fighters Megamix for the Sega Saturn. The game was produced and developed by Sega and their AM2 department and was released in 1996. This game was realistically the first ever 3D crossover fighting game which consisted of Virtua Fighter characters and Fighting Vipers characters. However, is this game actually worth your time or not? And are you missing out on a great fighting game? Or is this one which realistically you should just avoid altogether? Fighters Megamix doesn't really have a story. It's just Virtua Fighter 2 versus Fighting Vipers, and that's essentially it. No real time or effort was put into a proper story, the likes of which you get today in games such as Tekken X Street Fighter. So while there's no proper story mode, it doesn't really need it because it's just a fighting game consisting of Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers, and the fact is, Sega really wasn't sure if this was going to work to begin with. So while there's no real story, it doesn't really affect the game that much. The cast of characters is rather good, especially if you think back to 1996 and what was offered back then. For this roster you get all of the Fighting Vipers cast, and all of the Virtua Fighter 2 cast, along with some random special characters such as Janet from Virtua Cop, and the palm tree from the AM2 logo, and the car from the Daytona USA game. It's got some odd special characters which in truth I feel are a massive waste of time. Sega could have added characters from other games such as Blaze or Axel from Streets of Rage, one of the robots from Virtua On, one of the characters from the House of the Dead franchise, or a whole host of other options which they had available to them. So in short, they had a whole ton of options and characters to choose from a whole range of franchises which they had available to them. But instead of picking great special characters, they just added rubbish ones, and they make the game feel rushed, which it actually is. I like the Virtua Fighter characters, I like the Fighting Vipers characters. I really would have liked some good special characters put into this game, but instead, aside from Janet and Virtua Cop, the rest are absolutely rubbish. Fighters Megamix gameplay consists of putting both styles of game together from both series, but it doesn't really work. You see, the problem is the Virtua Fighter characters are now too slow, and the Fighting Vipers characters are too fast in comparison. So to make things work, the system works by using the Fighting Vipers combat system. You can switch this over to use the Virtua Fighter system, but then all of the Fighting Vipers characters feel slow and sluggish in comparison, and it just makes the game feel dull and unimpressive. The gameplay itself does work using the Fighting Vipers system, and it is fast and frantic. It just feels like it's missing something, however. The gameplay is okay, but it just doesn't seem to have that magic that something along the lines of Tekken 2 has. Appearance wise, I'll be honest, it's ugly. Very ugly. The fact is this game was rushed out for release by Sega and was only ever released on the Sega Saturn. So unlike Virtua Fighter 2 or Fighting Vipers, this game wasn't released in the arcades. As a result of this, when you look at both the Saturn ports of those games and then this, it looks like a downgrade in comparison. The graphics are okay, but that's all they are, and that's all you think when you look at them. It just feels very rushed, and other fighting games back then like Toshinden or Bloody Roar just end up looking so much better. It almost feels as if Sega went, well, this game's going directly to the Sega Saturn, it wasn't ever released in the arcades, we're not going to put any effort in making this game look as good as the Saturn ports of Virtua Fighter 2 or Fighting Vipers. So when you play both those games and then you play this, you really can see the difference in the graphics. It is a real downgrade. The stages in Fighters Megamix are a mix of both caged and open environments. The stages with a ring out feature from Virtua Fighter 2 are now replaced with a more open playing field. Think Tekken 2 but with less polish and extremely bland backgrounds, and that's what you get. The caged environments from Fighting Vipers are here, But just like how the graphics took a downgrade, so have the environments as well. The backgrounds in the Fighting Viper stages now appear less 3D rendered and more of a flat 2D. There are some brand new stages which are a nice addition, but they're very lackluster in comparison to the previous games. If you take a look at games of that time, such as Battle Arena Toshinden, or Bloody Roar, or a whole host of various others released around that time, and then look at this game's stages in comparison, it just doesn't look as good. It really just feels like another rush area of the game. Some of the stages are good, but they're nowhere near as good as what they could have been. I really do like some of the additions to the stages, such as Wolf's stage where he now has a caged arena, because I think that looks great. But however, with the caged arenas themselves, they also have the same problem that Fighting Vipers did on the Saturn II, and that's that when you go to a certain angle, you can see that the walls are missing, because they're just 2D rendered. It's okay, I understand it's a budget trick, but it just doesn't look very good. So with everything being said and done, is Fighter's Megamix worth buying today in 2019? Honestly, I'm not exactly sure. You see, the problem is this. Fighter's Megamix came out when the Sega Saturn was practically on life support. The PlayStation 1 had essentially killed off it as a rival, and Sega making the Saturn a pain in the ass to work with for developers, it didn't help matters much either. For most people, this game will be nothing more than a curiosity, as they will wonder what the game's like, but obviously most people won't be collectors of old consoles, so it is highly doubtful that you are just going to go out there, buy an old Sega Saturn console, then buy this game just to see if it's any good or not. You can always try emulating this game, however, but the emulators themselves do not do a very good job of emulating this game, and that is mainly down to the Saturn's overcomplicated hardware, meaning you can run the game, but you'll have loads and loads of problems such as transparency issues and a whole host of various others, so it's not really worth your time, as you'll just end up getting angry with it. The game also was rushed out for release, and you can tell. It looks ugly in comparison to Fighting Vipers or Virtua Fighter 2. So you're just left with this whole feeling that Sega themselves didn't really care. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend this at all, as aside from being a curiosity and fun for about 10 minutes, you'll just feel like the game hasn't had any proper time or effort put into it. And that's rather sad, considering how great this game could have been. Well, that's it for this review guys, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.